All right, we're recording. Hello, everyone. Welcome to module number 2. Today, we're going to talk about copyright, publishing, and record labels. So we're going to talk about intellectual property. Also, quick housekeeping stuff. For some reason, I thought we were a week behind when I messaged you guys earlier this week. And I guess we just pushed the lecture back a couple days, but really, we're on time. So your Twitter chat is on Tuesday as scheduled. And I emailed you guys the scheduled Twitter chats on Canvas. So those will stay on schedule. And the assignment is on schedule too. I don't know why I thought I was a week behind. Being on the road, things just blend together sometimes. But so the quiz will open on Monday. So it's coming Monday. And it will be due that Sunday. So a week from this Sunday. Whatever the date is on that. Let me take a quick look so I can give you guys actual dates. Let's see. So the Twitter chat will be November 24th, Tuesday. The quiz will open on Monday, November 23rd, and then it'll be due November 29th. So those are our dates. Let me go back to the slides. All right. Hopefully everybody can see the slides. So we're going to talk about intellectual property. So anything that is a creation from the mind is intellectual property. So this can be music, it can be a painting, it can be movies, it can be a script, it could be a play, it could be an invention, it can be a blueprint for a house. Anything that's created from the mind, that's considered intellectual property. So obviously the obvious one for music is the music. So we're going to talk about how to protect your music today. If you guys want to type into the chat, or either of you three musicians yourself, or either of you three songwriters or composers, or lyricists, or Yana, Raphael, and Stephanie. And then also, while you're using the chat, has anybody seen any shows this week? So I went to, what did I have? 3 shows since last time we talked. One show with Don Felder, the guy from the Eagles. He's a guitar player from the Eagles. We had him at Ponte Vedra Concert Hall. That was a cool show. Played obviously a lot of Eagles songs. And then 2 shows with 3 YouTubers that I've never heard of before. Maybe you guys have heard of them. But Danny Gonzalez, man, I'm so bad. Drew Gooden and Curtis something. Those are the 2 YouTubers I had 3 YouTubers I had in Tampa and Fort Lauderdale at the Amaturo at Broward Center. So hopefully y'all went to shows. Hopefully you guys are meeting people, making stuff, right? So let's get started with the class. So this one will be a little bit term heavy. Some important terms to learn when it comes to copyright and publishing. So when it comes to, let's say, a quiz or a final exam, hint, hint, these are some really good terms that you guys should be familiar with. So the first one is artist. There's a difference between the artist and the songwriter, right? So the artist is the person or persons performing the song. They're the ones in the studio recording it live, or recording it in the studio and then performing it live as well. That's the artist. So for example, say Rihanna. I like to use her as an example because she tends to not write a lot of her songs. And there was like a story once when her second album came out. She was like, doing really well, playing arenas, selling out shows. And there's like these articles out that Rihanna has no money, that she was broke. And it's because she doesn't own any of her music. And her tours were really expensive. And, once we get into the concert touring class, we'll start breaking down how much stuff costs. And, just because the artist, quote unquote, earns $100,000 on a show does not mean they walk with $100,000 in their pockets, right? There's so many things that they have to pay for. Production, their crew, their trucks, like their semi-trucks that are carrying all the production gear, their musicians, their tour buses, tour managers, production managers, commissions to the agents, commissions to the business manager, commissions to the manager, So by the time it's all said and done, that $100,000 guarantee can really disappear really fast. So yeah, it's important if you're an artist, if you can write songs and you're able to go into a studio and produce music, because it gives you a lot more power. So let's go to the next one. If you're a songwriter, so let's say, sorry, I'm skipping ahead in my mind. So if you're the songwriter is the person that is writing the song. And there's two parts to the song. So the songwriter, when you sit in your room, you write a song, right? And then you record it on your laptop. Now there's two copyrights that you just created. And the first one is the sound recording, also known as the master. So if you ever hear of anything about masters in the news, right? Someone's fighting for their masters or suing for their masters. So the big thing, the whole Taylor Swift thing that just happened, when Scott Borchetta, the guy that owned Big Machine, the record label, and sold it to Scooter Braun, or sold all, yes, he sold all of the copyrights, all the masters to Scooter Braun. So Scooter Braun now owns all the masters for Taylor Swift. And she doesn't earn any money on that. And she's with a new label now. So it's, it's this kind of little battle that they've been having online and everything. But cool thing that Taylor Swift's doing now, she's re-recording all of her songs. So she's going to own the masters of all the re-recordings. So it won't be the originals. So it'll be interesting to see what she does with it. But yeah, as an artist, you can do that. So the sound recording, all that means it's the original recording, right? So when you go into the studio and record a song, that's the sound recording, that's the master. And if you sign your masters over to the label, that's the part that the label owns. So that's the first copyright. So you have two copyrights to the song. Again, it's the sound recording, and the next part is the composition. And the composition has two pieces. It's the music and the lyrics. And that gets a little more complicated as well. We'll take a look into the composition. I'll skip to that yet. But there's two parts to the composition. I guess for now, know that a composition is the songwriting part, so the writers, and then the publishing. Those are the two parts of the composition. So two copyrights, sound recording, and the composition. If you use master on a quiz or something, that's fine too for sound recording. Then you have PROs. These are the companies that protect your music, that protect the songwriters of the music. So PRO stands for Performing Rights Organization. And there is four main ones that you need to remember. Those are BMI, ASCAP, CSAC, and then there's a new one that's called GMR. If any of you are familiar with Irvin Azoff, like Irvin Azoff is a legendary manager, label owner, promoter in the music business. He's probably one of the most powerful people in the music business. And about 3 or 4 years ago, he decided to start his own performing rights organization. And that basically represents all the artists that he works with. And they're collecting royalties or collecting, they use the word commissions. If you haven't I'm stumbling today. If you haven't heard the word royalties before. So basically royalties is like money that you're making whenever your song's played anywhere. And your PROs, ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, and GMR, are making sure that money's collected. So examples of your music being played. If you play your music live, you can collect royalties on that. So if you report your set list to ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, or GMR, you get paid a performance royalty. And every artist registers usually with one of the four PROs. ASCAP and BMI are the most popular ones. BMI is free to join. ASCAP has a fee. CSAC, you have to be invited by another CSAC member. And GMR is kind of like a mystery. You kind of have to be signed by Irvin Azoff to be a GMR artist. But every artist that releases music should be signed up by a PRO because they protect your rights. They make sure you get paid for your music. You only sign with one of them. If you listen to the podcast yet about the Copyright Masterclass, Davey J talks about it's a Coke or Pepsi question, right? Whether you prefer Coke or Pepsi, that's kind of like how you figure out what your PRO is. I always say you should look into what artists they represent. You should look into what showcases they have. So some of these PROs will have like a stage at a festival. So BMI has a BMI stage at Hangout Fest. ASCAP has a stage at festivals as well. So most festivals have an ASCAP or BMI stage. CSAC, not so often. They're the smallest one out of the four. But the benefit of CSAC is they tend to pay their artists more than ASCAP and BMI. So for example, if ASCAP collects $1 million or BMI collects $1 million, so the big artist on BMI is Taylor Swift and the big artist on ASCAP is Jay-Z, most of that money is going to go to their bigger artists, not their smaller artists. So CSAC, they say, is like more of the true deep like songwriter organization. That's like where most like the songwriters aren't necessarily artists, like releasing music or performing the music on the records. They're writing for other people usually, and a lot of those songwriters are on CSAC. So again, like you should definitely look into these 4 PROs if you're a songwriter, or if you're an aspiring manager and you want to manage artists. You should be familiar with the 4 PROs as well. Most of them, you're going to sign a 2-year deal with that PRO, and then all your music will be protected under that organization. And you have certain benefits, and you can't really negotiate your first deal, but the more successful you are, the more you can negotiate your deal with these organizations too. So if anyone's registered yet, you probably have gone through the contract. If you're not registered yet, maybe go through the sign-up process, and like you don't have to obviously finish the sign-up process, but just to see what the legal language is right behind these companies protecting your music. There's still some rights that you're giving away to them as well. So it's important to look at that language, and then in the future you can actually negotiate that. So that's important to know as well. The next term is a digital distribution company. These are companies that distribute your music. So CD Baby, TuneCore, right? That's what a lot of people use. A lot of independent artists use those. And that's how you get your music on Spotify, iTunes, Pandora, you name the platform, that's how you get your music on there. The next one is Harry Fox Agency. So any of you that might be DJs or doing covers, so Raphael said in the chat, he's performed covers before. So if you perform covers, like for example on YouTube, or you want to record a cover and put it on your album, you go through Harry Fox Agency. So you go to their website, and they're actually owned by CSAC, which is one of the PROs. But you go to their website, you find the song that you want to cover, you fill out a form. So it's basically where are you releasing the song, how many copies of the song you're expecting to sell, or are you putting it on YouTube, and how many views are you anticipating on getting, right? So that's how you can legally cover or sample music, is through the Harry Fox Agency. Then the last term on here is licensing company. And a licensing company is, if you ever hear like music on TV shows, film, commercials, and so on, that's usually handled either by a licensing company that are basically licensing your music for sync. So it's called a sync license if you're on TV show, movie, commercial, video game, and so on. So anything that has like video, like motion or moving images, motion picture, and there's music in that, that's called sync, right? You're syncing the music with the motion picture. So that's a sync license. And that's usually a licensing company that pitches your music for that. Also, there are publishing companies, and publishing companies protect your publishing rights. So in your composition, you have the 2 parts. It's the songwriter part and then the publishing part, which we'll dive into a little deeper in a second. So they protect the publishing part or the composition part, and then they also try to pitch your music as well, and they try to find other ways for you to make money. So if you, for example, the big difference, I have a really good friend, her name's Emily Kopp, and she performs under the artist name Lowen, for Lowen, and she is signed with a licensing company, and she has her songs and commercials for like JetBlue, for Mini Cooper, Ashley Furniture, Urban Outfitters, Free People. So lots of different companies. And so she's signed to a licensing company. If you are a songwriter that wants to write for other artists and have other artists release your songs, which is called getting a cut, right? So if someone records your song and puts it on their album, you got a cut. So if you ever hear that term, that's what that means. And so that in that situation, if you're writing for other artists, then you want to be on a publishing company. So publishing and licensing deals are similar, where they try to pitch your music for TV shows, commercials, video games, and movies. But publishing companies also do other things. They try to get your get your music written or performed by other artists or recorded by other artists. Or for example, at FIU, right, when you guys, for those of you that are in the music program, like all the compositions that you're learning and performing at concerts, that's also handled by publishing companies. So publishing companies are reaching out to colleges and universities and are actually trying to get their music performed at concerts at these universities and colleges, because again, whenever a song's performed live, then those artists are receiving royalties, and that's collected by the PROs that protect your music. And then real quick back to the PROs. So they collect your performance royalties whenever your songs are played, right? And so that's not just live. Whenever you go to a store, like a clothing store or a restaurant or a bar or whatever type of business, when you go into an elevator and there's music played, whenever you hear music played somewhere in public, that is protected. So you can't just open a restaurant and have music playing in the background, right? Or a store and have music playing in the background. That's actually illegal. So I always call the performing rights organizations like the mob. They literally can go around and shut down businesses for illegally playing music. So every business that plays music has to have a business license. So like, for example, Spotify and Pandora, like the most popular ones. So they get instead of getting like your individual account through Spotify where you pay, $8 to $10 a month, whatever it is, you get a business account, and it's actually a little bit more expensive. And that's how businesses can play music legally. And then the performing rights organizations are basically going around making sure that every business is set up legally. So it's actually reps in most major cities, like BMI and ASCAP have an office in Miami, and they're literally like the mob. They're going around to businesses and making sure everyone checks out correctly and is performing or like playing music the legal way. So that's something important to know. Let's go to the next one. Why is this not working? There we go. Royalties. So these are some more terms. Like I said, this is going to be very legal, term heavy. Royalties. So again, every time your music is played or recorded or something, you get a royalty or commission. But royalty is the term that's used in the music industry. So the main royalties you need to know about is mechanical royalties. So mechanical comes from the word machine. So basically every time there is a copy made of your song on a CD, on a tape, on a vinyl, on a as a file now, right? There's a WAV file or MP3 file, or a download. Whenever there's a copy made, you get a mechanical royalty, and a mechanical royalty is connected to your master. So again, two copyrights that you have is the sound recording or master. So same term for, or two different terms for the same copyright, or your composition. So every time a copy is made of your song, that's a mechanical royalty. So whoever owns the master, that is the person getting paid. So if you sit in your room, write a song, record it on Pro Tools through your laptop, and then release it, you own both parts of your copyrights, right? You own your master and you own your composition. So if someone goes and makes 100 copies of it, then you get paid. Now, if you have a label and you sign over your masters, then the label gets paid for those mechanical royalties. The next one is performance royalty, which we already covered. That's protected by your performing rights organizations, your PROs. And that's whenever your music is played publicly, either by you, another artist doing a cover of your music, being played in an elevator, being played at a business, right? It's on a TV show, a movie, commercial, video game, wherever. If your music's played anywhere where another person can hear it, that's a performance royalty. And then that is paid usually to the composition copyright holders. And the composition has two parts. It's again, so I'm going to repeat myself a lot here because I want it really to sink in. So the composition has two parts: is the publishing and the songwriters. So they call it shares, right? So the songwriter share and the publishing share. Those are the two parts. Then the next one, sync license. We already talked about that. So syncing music to motion picture. So TV shows, commercials, movies, video games. That's a sync license whenever a song is used for one of those mediums. Then the next one you need to remember is sound exchange. So sound exchange is also a performance rights organization, but it doesn't fall under the traditional PROs because sound exchange is a little different. So there is interactive streaming and non-interactive streaming, right? So interactive streaming is super simple. Is you're interacting with what you are hearing next. So if you go on Spotify, you pick the songs that you want to play, right? You make a playlist, or you just play a song. Then once the song's over, you go play the next song. You're picking the songs in the order that the songs are played. That's called interactive. So whenever there's interactive plays, that goes to your traditional PROs, right? That's ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, and GMR. Now, when it's non-interactive, that is when you're going on Pandora and you just type in an artist, and then Pandora picks who, what you're going to hear next. Or you go on Spotify and use Spotify Radio, and then Spotify through an algorithm picks what you're going to hear next. Or the other big one is Sirius XM, right? So obviously you can pick your music on Sirius XM. You just pick what station you want to hear to. But those are all versions of non-interactive streaming. You cannot interact what song you're going to hear next. All you can do is change the station. And there's many other platforms. But basically, when you can't pick the music, that's non-interactive. And the company that protects your music for those is Sound Exchange. So any of you that are in the music program and you're a composer and you compose classical music or jazz, there's a lot of stories of artists that have their music on Pandora in those genres, and they're not signed up with Sound Exchange. And a lot of businesses tend to use classical music or jazz, especially at doctors' offices or hotels, elevators in businesses or in buildings. They tend to use that type of music. And so imagine, and they usually use Pandora. So if you have your music on Pandora and you're a classical musician or a jazz musician, and your music gets played over and over and over and over again, there's all these royalties that are being collected that you're not getting paid on just because you're not signed up with Sound Exchange. So there's stories, and they'll hold your money for, I think it's 3 years. It's in Ari's book, so just make sure to look in the book. But it's either 3 years or 5 years. And there's a really cool example in there. But there's examples of artists that are finally signing up with Sound Exchange 3 or 4 years later, and all the time with thousands of dollars just sitting there. So the entire time they were like these broke musicians not making really any money off their music, and all of a sudden they're like, wow, I could have been making a full-time living from music all this time if I were just signed up with Sound Exchange, right? So it's really important to know about these organizations and ways your music can collect money, collect royalties. So really important to be familiar with that. Next, and real quick, again, as always, feel free to chime in if anybody have any questions or anything. You can either type in questions on the chat, or you can unmute your mic, and then just mute it back once we're done, to avoid any kind of background noise. But feel free to chime in whenever. Let me see. Got a question on the chat. How pricey is it to sign up with Sound Exchange? It's free, because Sound Exchange makes money too by collecting your royalties, right? They get a commission, so it's not pricey at all. All the PROs are free except for ASCAP. The fee on ASCAP is like super small. It's like under $100. So when you try to figure out which PRO to sign up with, don't let the fee on ASCAP discourage you. Really look into what conferences, festivals, workshops, educational resources these organizations have to figure out which one to sign up with. Don't just do it because BMI is free and ASCAP has a fee, or you don't know a CSAC artist. So that, for example, if one of you will sign with CSAC, or if I was signed with CSAC, I can invite anybody. So it's pretty easy. You just need to find an artist that's signed with CSAC, and you can be invited to that. So what we got here, copyrights. So if you go through the Copyright Office, right, to the U.S. Copyright Office, that's how you copyright your music. That's copyright.gov. You just go, cool thing with this platform, so I can actually show y'all. Let me see, copyright.gov. All right, let me see. Should be able to share this. Where are we? Google Chrome. All right. Everyone should be able to see my internet browser right now. So this is the copyright.gov website. So all you do is go here, register a copyright. Then you'll go down here. It's going to be a performing arts, right? So you're going to click on that. And then it just kind of has all the things that you can register right here. And my chats are in the way, so I can't see the other side. Just go over here. And then just right here, kind of just read through this stuff. They have some tutorials on how to fill out your copyright and everything. And somewhere over here, so here's the sound recording, right? That's your master. And then preview the standard application for performing arts works. There should be one for just the composition. Let's see. These are all the different things you can copyright for music, right? So you could just copyright vocals. You can just copyright complete songs or samples of songs. So somewhere in here, you should be able to sign up. But just go to the copyright website. It changes up a little bit. Let me just go here, register a work for performing arts. There you go. Okay, so just go there. You would create an account, and then you go through your application process. So it's pretty easy. They have a video on here too. That's like a tutorial. But that's how you copyright your songs, right? And there's this thing called poor man's copyright. I don't know if you guys ever heard of that. I think Ari talks about it in the book. But what people used to do is they would they record their songs on a CD and then mail the CD to themselves, right? Because it has a date on it. So the important thing is when you write a song, you want to protect it, it is already protected the second you record it on something, right? So if you, I don't know, write your lyrics out on a piece of paper and take a picture of it, that picture will now have metadata, and that metadata tells you when that file was created, and that is already protecting your music. So let's say you took a picture of your lyrics, you show it to your friend, and your friend is not really that good of a friend and steals your song. You're already protected by having a photo of it. So you don't necessarily have to copyright your music through the Copyright Office. There is a fee with copyrighting your music, right? So a lot of artists tend to not copyright their music. Like artists just starting out that don't really know much about copywriting. So just by taking a picture of your lyrics, taking a picture of your sheet music, or creating it, if you write your music on a Word doc, or your sheet music on a Word doc, any kind of file, like anything that has like data where you can prove when your music was recorded, that is already protecting your music. Now copywriting it through the US Copyright Office gives you additional rights. So if you record a song and don't copyright it and someone covers it, then you can tell them to take it down. You can have an attorney send them like a cease and desist letter, but you can't really sue them for it because you're not registered through the Copyright Office, right? So basically by registering your song through the Copyright Office, that gives you the right to sue. The other rights that you have is reproduction, right? So you are the first one allowed to create the music. So let's say you're working with a producer and a label, you guys write a song, and then the label goes off and has another artist record that song and releases it, that you can sue for that because you have first right to use the song because it's your song. Got a question here. You would have to copyright each musical piece separately. That's a great question. So Aiden just asked, do you have to copyright each musical piece separately? And the answer to that is no. You can do an album. And it doesn't necessarily, so let's say like you wrote 20 songs, right? And you're only going to use 8 of them for an album or 4 of them for an EP. You can copyright all 20 of them as a collection. So since Aiden asked a question, I'm gonna use you as an example. So it could be like the collective works of Aiden Volume 1. And then when you release the actual real album to public, it doesn't need to be called that. It can be called something else, whatever the album name is supposed to be. But there is a fee for each copyright. So each time you go through the copyright process, there's a fee, but there's no limit to how many songs you can copyright. So if that, hopefully that makes sense. So you can copyright one song, you can copyright 10 songs, and it's the same fee. So it's better to copyright, whatever songs you have, written. You can do songs by Aiden 2019, songs by Aiden 2020, songs by Aiden 2021, right? Whatever songs you wrote that year, you can copyright them all together, and doesn't mean you need to release it. And it also doesn't mean you have to put them all on the same album. You could have 3 different collections of copyrights and take songs from all 3 different collections and put them into an album that you're actually releasing to public. So good question. You don't have to do one song and pay the fee for each individual song. You can do collections of songs or full albums through the copyright process. It can be the same fee either way. So it's better to do multiple songs. The other rights you have by copywriting music is you have the right to distribute it. So nobody else can distribute your music, right? You have the right for public performance, to perform the song live. You have the right of public performance of the master recording. So the original recording that was recorded in a studio, you have the right to perform that. Derivative works, you have the right for that, right? So you remix and sample your own music. And then the last one is display works. So that's usually more for artists that create like paintings that they're putting like in an art gallery, but it is also for musicians, because more and more you see like pieces of art with lyrics on it, or example like sheet music. So if you go into get your music printed in like a sheet music book, that's a display work, right? So you have the right for all of those. So those are all the rights you have by copywriting your music. So next one. So here's the complicated one. Here's a little bit of a chart, like a flow chart that tells you like all the different things each copyright does. So the main thing you need to know is those 2 big circles are your 2 copyrights. So the one big circle is the musical composition. So that's the first copyright. And the other copyright is the sound recording. Now, real quick, back to the copyright office thing. If you go to copyright.gov, if you have your song already recorded, you want to do the sound recording one, because that gives you both copyrights in one registration. If you have written a song and you only have demoed it and you want to copyright that, you can copyright the composition, but it isn't necessarily like the master yet. But if you do the sound recording registration, it registers your sound recording and it registers your composition. So again, one fee to do 2 things. The musical composition, so the big important part of that is the musical composition has 2 pieces. One is the composer side, and the other one is the, I'm sorry, I'm just reading, not even. So if you look on the top, this is a little confusing, this chart, I guess, because that's composer and lyricist. Those are the 2 parts of the song, obviously. But I wonder if I have a better image. I'm sorry. Just kind of thinking out loud right now. Let me just look through my files. I feel like I have a better image to show you guys what I'm trying to explain. That's less confusing. 1 second. Where did I save that? Let's see. Basically, what I'm trying to find is this graphic I created that's not as convoluted as this. And basically, what you need to know when it comes to the composition, there's two shares of the composition. That's what the term they use, and it's the writer's share and then the publisher's share. And you can basically sign over parts of those shares. Sorry, I'm talking and still looking for the image. Where are you? And then, so basically, if you sit in your room, you write a song, you own both sides of the composition, right? Both sides of the composition share. You own the writer's share and you own the publisher's share. Now, if you want to write music for other people and you go to sign with a publishing company, then you sign over the publisher's share. So if your composition makes $100, for example, $50 of that goes to the writers and $50 of it goes to the publishers, right? So if you sit in your room, you write a song, you release that song, the composition part, not a sound recording, earns $100 through performance royalties. You make that full $100. Now, if you sign over to a publishing company and you sign over all of your publishing, then the publishing company makes half of it and the writers make half of it, right? So again, same numbers, is just the publishing company now is going to earn $50, and then you as the writer are going to earn $50. Now, if you have a co-writer, let's say you sit in your room, you write a song, and you guys decide to split that song 50-50. Then the writer's share now is half of you and then half of the other person writing, right? So let's say Tommy and Gina, like the Bon Jovi example. So let's say Tommy writes a song with Gina. They shared the writer's share 50-50. That means, again, I wish I was trying to find that picture. It's so much easier to give you guys when I give you guys a visual. So hopefully it's not confusing. But if you take a pipe, you know what? Let me just go to the whiteboard. All right. Sorry, y'all. I'm kind of trying to find something and think out loud. So if I go to the whiteboard and I draw a circle, this circle represents your composition, right? So the composition is split into two parts, and half of that is 50% is publisher share. Let me see if I can move that. Let me go back over here. 50% publisher. And then here is 50% writers, right? So if your song earns $100, sorry, I'm like figuring out how this works. All right, so in this scenario, if your song earns $100, 50 goes to the publisher, right? And 50 goes to the writers. So if you wrote the song in your room by yourself and you release it by yourself, you make $100. Now, let's complicate the situation a little bit. And let's say you have a publishing company owns 100% of publishing. And then you have Tommy owns 50% of the writer's share. And then Gina owns 50% of the writer's share, right? Now, if that song in this scenario makes $100, then the publishing company makes 50, and the writers make 25 each, right? So sometimes they use the example of this whole chart right here represents 200%. So 100% the publishers, 100% the writers. And that's why it's 50-50, but really these percentages are as such. It's really the publisher is making 50% of any money, and then Tommy and Gina are making 25% of any money that's earned, right? So that's how that works. So if a song makes $100, the publishers get 50, and Tommy makes 25, and Gina makes 25. So that's how this stuff gets really complicated, as you can see. What else could happen later on? If you are a successful artist and you're making money, then you can do what's called a co-publishing deal. We're not going to get that confusing in Music Business 1. But what that means is, let's say Tommy is the artist and Gina is like just a writer that's writing for Tommy's album. And then Tommy has a co-publishing deal, right? So where he gets a percentage of the publishing, and then his publishing company gets a percentage of publishing. But let's say Gina also has a publishing company. So really the publisher's share is now split also, again, 50-50 between Tommy's publisher and Gina's publisher, but Tommy owns a piece of his publishing. So really, maybe Tommy gets 25% of the publishing side, his publishing company gets 25% of the publishing side, and Gina's publishing company gets 50% of the publishing side, right? Things get really complicated and convoluted. And I definitely want to encourage you guys to listen to the podcast that I did with Davey J. I'm going to have test questions on that from the final, but she really explains really well how this all works. And you can see how confusing it can get really fast the second you start getting labels involved, publishing companies involved, and start writing with other people. And this is like the nice way of doing it, splitting things evenly. And they call it like this, like the Nashville way, right? So if you write a song with someone in Nashville, you guys are just going to split everything evenly. But the New York and LA way, they are literally fighting to fractions of percentages. So let's say Tommy and Gina write a song, and Tommy says he wrote 80% of the music. So then Tommy gets 80% of the writer's share, Gina gets 20% of the writer's share, and then it can get just as complicated between the publishing companies. So this can get really, really messy really fast when people start fighting for fractions of percentages. But yeah, that's kind of a basic overview on copyrights. Let me go back to the slides. And if I find that image that I'm trying to find, I'll send it to you guys. It's a little less messy as this. I found this one time and I thought it was really cool, but it's a little convoluted. Maybe not the best for an intro class. But again, it's a really good image to see how money is earned for the two different copyrights. And real quick on the sound recording side, it says 87.5% for the performing artist and 12.5% for the producer. That is not a standard percentage, right? On the composition side, it is standard. It is 50% is the publisher and 50% is the writers. But on the sound recording, it's just one big chunk, and that can be separated however is negotiated between the label and the producers and so on. And we'll get into more detail with that on Music Business 2. Not going to get too crazy in this class. I feel like I've already gone a little bit beyond the edge. All right, so real quick on record labels. We got about another 10 minutes. It's an Ari Herstand's book. He's a big advocate for being completely independent. And he says over 98% of all acts that sign to major labels fail. So the way to look at labels, there's a lot of like bad rap around labels, especially amongst like younger generations. They, because you hear all the drama that's happening with labels, artists getting screwed, artists suing their labels for their masters, artists not making any money. So there's the stigma of labels being evil and bad, and some of them probably have bad deals. Doesn't mean the entire labels are bad. But what I always say is, if an artist signs a bad deal, is it really the label's fault for the artist signing, right? Just because an artist really, really wants a record label deal and signs the first deal that they get, and it's a terrible deal, it's not necessarily the label's fault. Hey, they gave out a crappy deal and the artist signed it. Just like renting a house. If you sign a crappy lease, you're stuck with that lease, right? So you can negotiate every little thing on a contract. Just the more power you have, like the more money the artist earns, the bigger of an audience the artist has, it gives them leverage that they can negotiate more things on their label contracts and can get better deals. And the best way to look at a label, every artist is a business, right? Like we talked about in the first module. So you're a business, and every business has partners. So if you're going to bring on a partner in the business, it's got to be a mutual partnership, right, where both parties are benefiting equally. Those are the best types of partnerships. So a label is just a partner. And the three main things that a label can bring to the table is money. So if you don't have money to record an album the way you want to record it because it costs $100,000, the label can give you $100,000 to record an album. If you want to go on tour, right, and be on tour support, that's what they call it. So you want to be the opening artist on a big tour, the label can pay for you to be on a big tour. So money is a really big part. You want to make a really expensive, elaborate music videos with really great directors and producers, the label can pay for that. So money is one of the benefits of a label. Marketing is another benefit of a label. Labels are sitting down with people from Spotify, Pandora, radio stations, all the powerful media outlets, TV stations, MTV, I don't know, Jimmy Fallon, the Grammys, whatever big, powerful media outlets there are, the labels are having meetings with the people that run these companies every single day. They can literally have probably those companies' executives on speed dial. They just make a phone call and really quickly call someone and get them on the phone. Whereas like as an independent artist, that is very hard because you don't know those people, right? Especially if you're not located in the cities that those companies are based in, usually New York, Nashville, or LA, somewhere in Miami. It's really hard to build relationships with these companies and then get your music on better playlists on Spotify, right? Not all the playlists or algorithmic playlists. Most of them are curated. And there's a Spotify curated playlist, and the labels can have influence on that. Another important thing to know is the term payola. That is something that's illegal, right? In the United States. In some countries, it's free for all. But a label technically cannot pay Spotify or a radio station to play their artist's music. But what they do, what they can do is, let's say, so Taylor Swift's on a major label now. So let's use her as an example. Let's say Taylor Swift comes to Miami, and there's a Spotify rep in Miami, and there's a big radio station in Miami. So now the label rep will come to Miami and says, hey, Spotify and big, powerful music or radio station in Miami, let's go have dinner. What's the nicest restaurant in Miami? So they go to the nicest restaurant, right? And they order bottles and bottles of wine. And then the label goes, oh, we'll get the tab. Don't worry about it. We'll pay for this. Let's go to the show. And then go to the show. And it's like, hey, Spotify and big, powerful radio station in Miami, do you want to meet Taylor? And they're like, of course they do, right? So then they go backstage and they meet Taylor. And then it's about time for showtime. So they're like, hey, let's go to our box. We have a VIP suite. And they go to their VIP suite, and it's loaded with food and booze. So that's something labels can do, and they do all the time. So they're really schmoozing the crap out of these radio stations and Spotify. And that is how they kind of strong arm these people to get their music played on their radio station. So at the end of the next day, maybe the label will email the radio rep and say, hey, I hope you had a great time yesterday. We have a new artist that we just signed as a single coming out. Just wanted to share this with you. Would love it if you can play it on your radio station. And guess what? Next thing that happens, their music's on the radio station, right? So that's how that really works. I've had a friend that used to work for Big Machine, and that was her job. That's what she did. So again, the three benefits of a label is that was a giant tangent, is the money part, the marketing piece, and then sponsorships. Labels can bring sponsors to the table as well because they have relationships with all these giant big companies and brands. So is it worth signing over all of your masters? And most of the major, all the major labels have a publishing company as well. So let me go to the next slide real quick. So there's three major labels, right? So that could be a great quiz or final exam question. What are the three major labels? And those are Warner Music, Universal, and Sony. So then all three of those have a publishing company. So Warner has Warner Chappell, Sony has Sony ATV, and then Universal just has Universal Publishing. So is it worth signing over your entire masters and your publishing to a label in order to get those benefits? But also knowing that 98% of artists that sign to a major label fail, right? So those are things to think about. Knowing one, 98% of artists fail. Two, the label does have a lot of benefits. So it's really comes down to what are you bringing to the table. If you have a massive audience already, let's say you blew up on YouTube or on Instagram, wherever, and you're already making 6 figures or close to $500,000 a year as an artist, and now we get approached by a label, you have leverage, right? You don't have to sign over your masters now. You don't have to sign over all of your publishing. You do more of a co-publishing deal. So it's all about getting leverage, about building an audience and finding the right partner at the right time. And that right partner doesn't always have to be a major label. It can also be an independent label, right? All the same benefits as a major, maybe just not as powerful, maybe not as much money, maybe not as many connections and relationships yet, and not as many potential sponsors you have. Here's just a quick slide on some examples of artists that are signed to independent labels. So there's like what they call major independents, right? So like some of these independent labels are really big and they do have a lot of power. Not as much as a major, but they also have really deep pockets and big influence on the music industry. So it's important not just to be familiar with the 3 majors, but also the big independents. And then real quick on the independents, so all of these are truly independent, meaning they're not distributed by a major and they're not a subsidiary of a major. So there's all these major labels, these 3 have a lot of smaller companies like RCA, for example, that might, it's not, RCA might seem it's not like one of the 3 majors, but they're actually owned by one of the 3 majors, right? So these 3 majors have like sub brands that might be genre specific, and you might be signed to a subsidiary of a major label. So if RCA signs you, you're under a major label. I think Universal owns RCA. But if you look at like on Wikipedia at the 3 major labels, you'll see all the subsidiaries, and some of them have lots of subsidiaries. So we're out of time. Does anybody here have any questions? That's here on the live lecture. Feel free to type them in, or you can unmute your mic. Any questions before we sign off? And then real quick, for the quizzes, I don't think the quiz this week will be a question answer. It'll be ready on Monday. Aiden asked to repeat the 3 majors. The 3 majors are Universal, Sony, and Warner. Those are your 3 majors. Where was that at? The quiz. So the quiz will be available Monday. Just because a quiz may not be, a lot of quizzes will be like mini assignments actually. I think for Music Business 1, it's about half and half. I need to look back. So half and half where it's question answer quizzes, and then the other half are like mini assignments. I try to do more mini assignments because I feel like they're more real life and practical. This one will probably be a question answer just because there's a lot of terms, and I want you guys to be familiar with those terms. So yeah, be familiar with the terms. Be familiar with what's in the book and any additional materials. The main one. So really, what did I have on additional materials for this module? The only one you really need is the one with Davey J, that interview. There will be questions from that. There will be questions from this lecture, and then there will be questions from the reading from the book on a quiz. Any other additional materials I have on the syllabus? I mean, if you want to learn about the music business and you want to be successful in it, I still want to encourage you guys to check those out. Taking a look at the syllabus now. That's actually the only one I have. So the only additional materials I have is a Davey J interview. So that's the episode number 56 on the podcast. So that's all you need. So if you guys have any questions, email me, send me a message on Canvas, and also please submit your assignments on Canvas. So if you go to the assignments tab, just look for the Twitter chat there and the quiz there and submit it there. I know the directions were confusing. I'm sorry about that. That's from an old semester and it hasn't been completely updated yet. But please just submit it on Canvas. My email got really clogged and I fell behind, and that's why I just kind of created a template message that I just copy and pasted to kind of catch up on my emails a little quicker. But yeah, anybody has any questions, email me, send me a message on Canvas. Have a really good weekend, and I'll talk to you all soon.